All right, welcome everyone to the OWOW Round 2 Call for Projects Workshop number 1. The purpose of the workshop is to walk everyone through the One Water, One Watershed or OWOW Call for Projects online application form, and also connect the form's contents to the OWOW rating and ranking criteria that we talked about with stakeholders and the OWOW governance of various workshops throughout last calendar year. And also, lastly, cover new items included in the Department of Water Resources Proposition 1 Round 2 Draft Guidelines and Proposal Solicitation Package. That's an important document or set of documents that just came out in mid-December of last year. And those documents have really laid out the state criteria for the Integrated Regional Water Management Program, which OWOW falls under. And so I've got a couple slides that highlight some of the influences from this new set of documents from the state and how they've impacted the Call for Projects online form. So we'll go into that while we're talking about the form contents. So other upcoming workshops, we'll have 3 other workshops, and here are the times for them. Each workshop will last about an hour. A Zoom webinar will be used like this one. Workshops will cover a majority of the same material as this workshop, unless we get requests from stakeholders to cover new topics. So I'll probably go through pretty much the same presentation I'm providing now. But if we get questions that stakeholders want to see different things, then I'll modify this PowerPoint and cover new items. But generally, they'll probably largely cover most of the same content. Announcements of these meetings will be sent out before the meetings through our OWOW mailing list. If you want to register for that list and you didn't receive our last email, please sign up for the OWOW distribution list by following this web link here. We're steering everyone to this web link. This is our dedicated page to the OWOW funding grant process. And the link to the Call for Projects form is on this OWOW web page, as well as recordings of this workshop, future workshops, notices of these workshops will all be there. But if you want to receive email reminders, we ask that you go to this web link and also sign up for the OWOW distribution list. So we are talking about Integrated Regional Water Management, or IRWM funding, and it's important to note that there's funding areas from the state. You are in the Santa Ana River Watershed IRWM funding area, or also known as the IRWM region. And this is the boundaries of the IRWM funding area. It includes 3 counties: North Orange County, Western San Bernardino, and Western Riverside counties. So it's important that if you are in this meeting and your project isn't in this area, we can help you locate the other IRWM region and funding area across the state. Say you're in LA County and you have a project that in that area, we can guide you to the right contact because there is another lead agency like SAPA in the other IRWM regions. So that's the funding area where your project needs to be. These are the dollar amounts that have been assigned to us under the Proposition 1 water bond. We have broken out the total amount of funding of $27 million into various categories. There's a portion for grant administration for SAPA to manage the grant through conclusion of all the projects that are successful. There's also a Northern Orange County call out in this funding that's about $7.2 million. Then there's the other portions of money, the upper watershed-wide, DAC implementation money. Those will all be awarded through the OWOW Call for Projects process. So note, this funding, this orange slice of the pie, the $7.2 million, will be competed through the OC IRWM group. That OC IRWM group is administered by Orange County Public Works. Christy Suppies is the lead there. So if you need information regarding their process, they'll have an application. And similar call for projects like ours, it'll probably follow a pretty similar timeline. But if your project takes place in North Orange County, you'll want to submit your project through their process, possibly in addition to our process. All right, so that's the funding area, boundaries, the different pots of money for this grant process. Here's the schedule. that we have for the OWOW process. So some important dates here, DWR released their draft grant guidelines in December, as I mentioned. We worked in December and early January to finalize the call for projects form. We released it and emailed it out via the OWOW distribution list last Thursday. This is of course, our first workshop that'll take place in this call for projects period that'll close on March 25th. We estimate that DWR released their final set of guidance documents in February. Those largely don't change a lot. If they do change the call for projects process, we would make changes to it by working with our OWOW governance and then possibly delay the call for projects. If major changes occur, we need, of course, stakeholders like you to be able to respond to them and adjust your project application accordingly. So after that, after the call for project closes, we get the final grant guidelines, which may or may not change anything. We go through what we call a staff review. We review everyone's applications, make sure that everyone has submitted a complete application, they're eligible for this funding. And then we go through something called the participatory budgeting process, which will take place in April. It'll be a series of workshops, and I'll explain what that is in a couple more slides. So staff and stakeholders will work together here in the month of April, but we need to bring the suite of projects that have been successful through this OWOW call for projects and participatory budgeting process to our OWOW governance for approval before we submit them to a final application to the lead state agency, Department of Water Resources. So we get the OWOW governance approval on the projects in May, and then we work with the successful applicants to submit an application to DWR in September. DWR then reviews it and then announces their funding awards. We estimate in May. That's our best guess based on previous funding rounds. And then another best guess based on previous funding rounds is DWR agreement would be executed with SAPA, thereby allowing the successful applicants to get invoice for their project costs and get grant funding. That's an important date if you're successful in the application. As I mentioned earlier, there are two things that came out in the draft PSP that has influenced the application, the OWOW application, and I'll talk about these when I walk you all through the OWOW Call for Projects online form. But I wanted to lay them out ahead of time so they didn't catch everyone off guard. So it made sense what I was going to explain when we get into them. So the first item that came from those documents from the state in December is they have a new requirement that we have had to include in the Call for Projects form. The requirement states here on the left side that local application processes such as SAPAs must prioritize projects that will have all CEQA, NEPA, and permitting completed within an estimated 12-month of the funding award date. Note that the award date is estimated to be May 2023. So you can do the math there with the 12 months. And the key word there is prioritize projects. It doesn't require that all projects have this 12-month readiness, but it requires the process, the OWOW process, to look at and prioritize projects that have those 12-month readiness. So I'll walk into this a bit more detail, but the method for incorporation to the OWOW process really will be done through the participatory budgeting process, as I'll explain, which occurs after projects are initially ranked, and projects with an estimated schedule that reflect DWR's 12-month timeline will also be prioritized for funding, and I'll explain how we plan to do that. The other DWR policy from the draft PSP was disadvantaged community implementation projects, those that directly benefit disadvantaged communities, may request that they be considered for general implementation funding if DAP implementation funds are completely utilized. So also the way that we will handle that is during the participatory budgeting phase of the OWOW process, which again occurs after projects are submitted and then ranked. If certain DAC implementation projects are not initially within the top tier of the funding category of the general implementation suite of projects, they may request general implementation funding. So if that didn't make any sense, what I just said, that's okay. I'll explain that in further detail and lay it out with some slides. But I wanted to lay that out here ahead of time of the two items. But before I get into those two items, and before I get into the call for projects form, it's important to lay out how your project will be scored. I just mentioned in the previous slide that we're doing things in the participatory budgeting process, which will happen in April, But before that, your project's going to get scored, and it's going to get scored based on two formulas that we talked about with stakeholders last calendar year over several workshops, and also got approved by the OWOW governance. And there's two formulas because there are two different funding categories that you can get submitted for projects. One is the general implementation funding category, and the other is disadvantaged community implementation category. And the way your project is scored is you provide benefits in various benefit categories, and the benefit categories I'll show on a couple slides here, but the benefit category can be something like water supply or stormwater. So if your project has those benefits, you would numerically enter them into the call for projects form. Say it's 100 acre feet is your benefit. And then your project would be scored. What's happening here in this part of the equation, the ranking formula, is your project would be scored based on the other projects that are submitted. So if your project has 100 acre feet, but the other project in the general implementation project category has 500 acre feet, you would only get 1/5 of the total of the weighted value. And the weighted value is a pre-assigned value of each category, a number between 0 and 10. So the take home here is everyone's competing within the projects within their category, general implementation projects or DAC implementation projects. And it behooves you to have the most benefits, the highest amount of benefits, and it behooves you also to have the most different categories of benefits, water supply, stormwater, and I'll show what all the benefit categories are. You can see the general implementation and DAC implementation formulas are slightly different. There's less categories in the DAC implementation. And we also have these extra credit categories we've been talked about them a lot last calendar year. I don't think we need to spend a ton of time on them unless there's questions, but there's also ways to get an added percentage of points. Whatever you calculate in this part of the brackets, you can get 10%, an additional 10% of this value if the organization leading the project is a Native American tribe. If you have a regional project, and there's a definition of that in the call for projects form, you can get an extra 15%. If new and innovative, there's also a definition of that, 5%. If a nonprofit partner, 5%. And DAC has a very similar way of thinking with extra points. And these are the different tables. We covered this a lot last calendar year in our workshops, but I thought I'd show these. We're not going to spend a ton of time with them because I want to get to the form, but if there's questions, we can come back to this. But you can see the different categories here for general implementation: water supply, water quality improvement, stormwater protection, habitat improvement, percentage of DAC, or this is EDA, stands for economically distressed areas. It's another measure of how disadvantaged your benefit areas, or climate change adaptation and mitigation. And the weighting factors are those one values. So you're all competing for a certain percentage of these weighting values. These are the different explanations of the percentage points. They're more yes or no questions as opposed to entering in your 300 acre feet or some numeric value, but you've got to justify those extra points. So that's really the methodology for the ranking. DAC is very similar in its thinking. Although DAC, to be a DAC project, you'll see there's no DAC weight. There's no category like the general implementation for DAC. Instead, there's a gate, an eligibility gate. So if your project does not directly benefit a DAC community, then you can't submit for this project. You actually have to provide at least 75% of your benefit area has to be DAC. So large area that you're benefiting, say it's a watershed, a sub-watershed within the Santa Ana River watershed, at least 75% of that watershed's population and or geography has to be classified as disadvantaged community. And I'll walk us through what the tools to do that mapping. After ranking, after projects are ranked, so I just walked through how numerically projects are ranked, and I also mentioned the participatory budgeting process. So after projects are ranked, we go through that 1 month OWOW participatory budgeting process. And that is really a series of workshops held, developed with the goals of transparency, objectivity, and deliberation. And the purpose is to receive input on the projects proposed in both competition pools, and ask tough questions. Is the project eligible for OWOW Prop 1? Are the benefits claimed realistic? Is the watershed improved without unreasonable expense detriment to others? And does it include active participation in multiple agencies? So this process is a series of workshops where we all get together in the same room or over the same Zoom meeting and talk about everyone's projects and make sure people explain the method they use to claim their benefits, which is really important because, as you saw, we are using your claim numeric values to score your project. So we'll ask questions to make sure you use the best available science. You looked at other example projects to estimate your benefits, those sorts of things to make sure no one's overclaiming their benefits. After the participatory budgeting process, what we did last time is, we trued up some people's benefits and re-ranked the projects. So after that was done in Prop 1 Round 1 a number of years ago, we allocated funding to those top projects based on their top project share of the sum of the weighted scores. So what we did is we took, we got the ranking formulas did their thing, pretend this is the general implementation category here. We got 12 projects. We ran the formulas and we went through the participatory budgeting process. We made sure everyone was claiming the right and true benefits. Then we ran the formulas again and we got these ranking scores. Well, we funded projects based on their share of the top projects. So this project scored the most. So it got a fraction of the funding available. And its fraction was this 699 out of the sum of these 5 top projects. So again, and not like similar to the ranking formula, it's another fraction. We're multiplying in this case, your score out of the share of the other top scores. And then round 1 and what we plan to do under round 2 as well. Any state priority projects near the threshold were included. So I believe under round 1, there was a fire prevention project, which was a state priority last time. And that I believe was 6 or 7, and that was moved up into the top of the ranking. All right, I will pause there. I covered a lot. That was basically summarizing everything we covered last year in these workshops, talking about the rating and ranking. So that was all to give us a groundwork for diving into the form and how it relates to this rating and ranking criteria. So I will pause, see if there's any questions. And I see some here in the chat. Why the September due date? I remember seeing this in the DWR workshops long ago, but don't see the September date in the PSP or the guidelines. Yeah, great question. So based on our conversations with DWR, they're still using September as their de facto date. It's true, it's not on the website, but in conversations with them, that's their de facto date as of now. They may change that based on input from the 48 IRWM regions across the state, but September is the best thing we can plan towards. So that's why we're using September. Will this presentation be available afterwards? Yes, we'll post it on that website that I showed, and I'll paste it in the box later. That's the website we're steering everyone to, that's SAPA.org, future funding opportunities. Are the benefits weighted based on the project cost? No, they're not. They're weighted based on how they compete against the other projects in their category. There's not a I guess this is a benefit cost ratio type question. There is not a benefit cost ratio type numeric rating factor. Any other questions before I move on? Feel free to unmute yourself too and ask your question. All right, moving on here. All right, so the call for projects forum. So the forum is available on that same website, sapa.org/OWOW/future funding opportunities. You'll find the form there, and it'll take you to a SAPA intranet website. It's a slightly different looking web page that the form is actually on, but it's another website managed by SAPA. So there are there's 30 questions that you have to fill out. And those questions have to be done if you just plan to submit your project as part of the OWOW Plan Update 2018. So the OWOW Plan Update 2018 is the DWR approved IRWM plan for the Santa Ana funding area. So in the past, a lot of project proponents just want to be included in the plan. they want to submit their project, include various information, and have the OWOW governance approve it and be included in the plan. And that's done often for other grant opportunities that they want to go after. Maybe another state grant opportunity requires you to be in the plan. So that's one route to go, and that's a shorter route. You only have 30 questions. But if you want to be in the plan and request funding, it consists of approximately 50 questions you have to fill out, including some multi-part questions. The form has been tested in Chrome and Firefox, so we recommend you use either of those two browsers. So some of the form's contents change a bit, not a whole lot, but change a bit depending on your project. And I'll walk you through that. So some things to think about: do you just want to be included in the IRWM OWOW plan, or do you want funding as well? And does your project directly benefit disadvantaged communities? Is your project a decision support tool? And I'll define what that decision support tool is. But these three questions really relate to some of the different questions you get. So the first break in the road for you that you'll have to choose between is if you want to submit for the OWOW plan only, you just want to include in the plan, or you want grant funding and be part of the OWOW plan. So that's one break in the questions you'll get. Like I said, you'll get 50 questions instead of 30, depending on what you do here. And the next, you'll also have to decide upfront when you're completing an application. Are you going to submit as a disadvantaged community implementation project? And there's, as I showed in that pie chart, there's 4.1 million available. Or are you going to submit for the general implementation pot of money, and there's 4.4 million available? But remember that that DAC track has an eligibility gate where at least your project needs to have 75% of its benefit area must be DAC. So that'll drive which project you're in. And remember, there's two ranking formulas that I showed. So you'll submit a different amount of benefits. There's 5 different benefit categories here, just 3 here. There's more extra percentage points here, less extra percentage points here. So just keep those in mind. Those will influence some of the questions that you get in the form. The last thing that you'll choose, and this will be later in the form, is what type of project you have. Do you have an implementation project, which is your construction or conservation project, or do you have a decision support tool project? And that's more of a pilot decision support tool planning project. And I'll walk through the definition of that. That definition comes from Department of Water Resources, and they have a whole 2-page document related to what that entails. So it's important to think about this ahead of time, what you plan to submit as. And you can be an implementation project or a decision support tool in either pot of money, DAC implementation or general implementation, doesn't matter. But these are a decision you'll have to make at some point in the form. So I'll pause there. That was just to kick us off on the form and kind of paint a picture of the different directions that the form will go in. So I'll pause there for questions. All right, so the first question we have, the PSP states that the costs incurred after the final award date will be eligible for reimbursement. Is the final award date when DWR announces award, or after DWR, or when it executes an agreement with SAPA? The final award date would be when DWR announces award. Yeah, it's just basically a 1-page document that they send out. So it's not the executed agreement date. So that's the final award date. Our decision support tools score differently. They are slightly scored differently, and we'll get into that. Yeah, if it's okay, we'll save that question in a bit, but great question. Yeah, they are scored slightly differently. Any other questions? Feel free to unmute yourself too if you have something. All right, well, moving on. So here's what the form looks like. After you go to that web page I mentioned, this page will pop up, and it looks like this. It's got a pretty picture of the Cleveland National Forest, and it has a number of different tabs here at the top. This is the start page that we're at. It's got a nice opening statement here. And then it's got this accordion of different drop-down items that you can choose from. So we won't walk through all these accordion items. And I'm not going to cover all these different tabs. Some of them are pretty self-explanatory, so I'll skip them. But I'm going to walk us through some of the ones that have a lot of detail behind them, that it's careful you read the guidelines when filling out the questions. So I clicked one of the accordion menus here. This is probably the most important one on the start page. And it's got some important things like the online project submittal form instructions. That's a nice handy document to use when you're filling out the application. Explains how to do certain things on the application. There's also this handy thing that is an MS Word version of the project submittal form. We took this online form and put it in a Microsoft Word document. So that's an important thing to use if you want to write your questions down in Word before pasting them into the dialog boxes in this form. We also have a project location map, which is a live map with locations that get submitted. So that's more of a handy thing after the call for projects closes. We also have the OWOW IRWM plans, goals, and objectives. That'll come in handy for some questions. Information about resource management strategies from the California Water Plan update. And then links to 2 disadvantaged community type tools from DWR. The majority of these are linked when you're filling out the form. So when you have questions related to DAC and EDA and benefit area, and even these GIS and KMZ files, which I recommend downloading and giving to your GIS person if you have one. These will all be linked within the form contents, within the different pages of the form. So this is a nice summary of different items up front here on the start page. So I'm on the login page, and you can probably figure out that you'll need, if you don't already have one, you'll need to create a username and password, use any email address. And then you'll be asked to enter a new project or edit an existing project. So our staff and I have worked on adding in a couple of dummy projects, and that'll allow us to show you kind of how to fill out the form. So I'm clicking on one of the dummy projects, and I've skipped the organization page, which is about your organization. It's pretty self-explanatory, and I've gone to the general page here. And you can see right up front, you've got to name your project, but also very importantly, you've got to choose, are you doing IRWM plan only, or what pot of money are you selecting? You'll see there's a lot of important information boxes, and we recommend you click on them when you have questions regarding it, like estimated project life. There's some guidelines from the Department of Water Resources on that. So when you click on this, a pop-up box will pop up. So in the example, I'll click on this important info box, and this is our longest info box. Apologize for how long this is, but we wanted, since this is the beginning of the application, we wanted to make sure we got all this information to you. So this really explains what I talked about earlier, that you can only submit between 2 competition pools, the general implementation or DAC. It also lays out, if you're thinking about DAC, there is a tool that DWR has applicants use to map out your project, and I'll show you what that looks like. And it also has a definition of what directly benefits DAC is. That's an important, very important item and guideline from DWR. If you're thinking about competing in the the DAC implementation pot of money, you really got to understand what directly benefits DAC is. Your project that, say protects habitat or quality of recreational water bodies are generally not competitive because they are, indirect benefit, i.e., the general public can enjoy those benefits. And I have a slide that shows that. So these dialog boxes are really important, when filling out this application. They have a lot of detail. So if you are going to do the the disadvantaged community implementation funding, there's that link that I showed that takes you to a tool that DWR maintains that allows you to map your project and what percentage of DAC area within your benefit area you have. So it's important to draw out in GIS or on Google Earth or some type of other GIS type software your benefit area, because this DAC mapping tool allows you to upload that polygon, that boundary of your benefit area, and then it automatically calculates what your DAC overlay is, what percentage of your benefit area is DAC. So that's really important. There is also a way, if you would like to use outside justification of your benefit area, maybe income surveys, there's a method to do that that you can do in lieu of this form. So look for that guidance in the OWOW application form when you get to the DAC justification area of the form. And to further reiterate what I mentioned about the direct DAC benefit, this summarizes what's in that pop-up box, but direct is a really important adjective. Those benefits need to accrue to those parcels where DAC community members work/live. That's where the direct comes from. So projects that create water supply, protect property from flood control are okay. Projects that protect water quality on parcels are okay, septic to sewer. Other projects that improve infrastructure related to supply or quality are okay. But as I mentioned, projects that protect habitat and quality of recreational water bodies are not competitive because the general public enjoys them, i.e. they're indirect. So the way I like to think about it is direct being, it's water flowing through a meter or something direct like that, or the property is being protected from flooding. It's a direct benefit to some residential type property. So if you have questions related to that, you have a project in mind, but have questions about how direct is your benefit, please reach out. Also, when it comes to, right off the bat, we were talking about your benefit area of your project and mapping it into this DWR tool. So it's also important you think about, what your benefit area is. And eventually you'll be asked in the form to tell us, upload not only to the DWR tool, but also upload into the OWOW call for projects form your benefit area. So we're asking you to, use GIS or Google Earth and upload a polygon shapefile to us. And we have guidance on how to do that, and it's in one of the info boxes. But here again, I summarize it in a prettier slide. Benefit areas are limited depending on what type of project they are. So if they're an ecosystem project or maybe a water quality project, you need to use U.S. Geological Survey designated hydrologic unit code level 12 watersheds, HUD 12 watersheds. And we actually developed a GIS online mapping tool that I'll show in a minute that will help you look at HUD 12 boundaries. I know this may be a little foreign for some. What is Ian talking about? HUD 12, never heard of this. But we have a tool and more information that hopefully make applicants be able to digest this guidelines easier. For coastal water quality projects, say you have a coastline improvement project, since that is a large body of water, you can draw your buffer area 10 miles inland. Also for inland water bodies, 10 miles inland, if there's a direct or if there's a benefit. So I'll pause there. I got through some of the form, but as you saw, it gets complicated, and I had to explain some of the background behind some of the form's questions. We talked about the DAC mapping tool, what DAC is, direct DAC benefits, and even benefit areas. So I'll pause there and see if we have any questions. Is there a required cost share for DAC projects? Yeah, we'll get into that. But the cost share may be waived, totally waived, or reduced depending on your benefit. And you can use the two tools that I showed earlier, on that first start page, the DWR Disadvantaged Community Mapping Tool, or even the DWR Economically Distressed Area EDA Mapping Tool to determine that. For the cost share waiver and reduction, they're allowing you to use not only disadvantaged communities as your delineation for waiving, but also economically distressed areas. So that's a nice added plus if you want to get your cost share waived. So, but I'll talk about that in a bit more detail in a future slide. Any more questions? All right, I'll move on here. So we were talking about the pop-up boxes that were appearing here on the general page. So one other pop-up box that I wanted to mention in case we had any stormwater folks on the call today. A lot of you who work for flood control are familiar with the stormwater resource plans. And the IRWM plan and stormwater resource plan are two statewide programs, and they're linked. And they're linked in this OWOW Call for Projects form. Some of you may be submitting for your project for inclusion for the OWOW process and also your local stormwater resource plan. So we have a info box related to who the contact is for your respective stormwater resource plan. They're by county. So Orange, Riverside, and San Bernardino counties are there. And also a description of what type of project really falls under a stormwater resource plan. So if you're interested in submitting for both, it's important you, and if you have a stormwater related project, you look into that. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with that if you're a stormwater resource expert, but we wanted to highlight that for everyone. So that's the general page. The next page is to just put a lat and longitude dot on the map of the funding area of where your project is. It doesn't have to be where an excavator is going to specifically dig, but it has to be in the general location of your project. This is not a polygon drawing tool, so you won't draw your benefit area in here. You'll just put a general dot of where your project is. That benefit area, that polygon, you'll upload later and draw yourself on your own software as opposed to drawing in some tool like this. But this is just so we can map everyone's projects easily going forward on the same map. So I skipped a bunch of pages there that are pretty self-explanatory, partners, goals, RMS. Once you get into them, they're pretty much all related to the IRWM guidelines from the state. They're pretty self-explanatory. I did skip here to eligibility as it's a bit more complex. So this is really where you get to the choosing between implementation or decision support tool projects. And when you click on that link that we have in the form, it takes you to what a decision support tool is as defined by DWR. And they're the only non-implementation project type eligible to receive Proposition 1 implementation funding. So the keyword there is non-implementation, right? The decision support tool project should collect data and or generate a model to support future water management decisions. Proposals for a decision support tool project should include a clear description of how data will be collected and used for future projects or the development of future programs, i.e. who will collect the data, how the data will be used, and what decisions will be derived. And then Proposition 1, the water bond that the legislature and the voters approved in 2014 actually has a definition and examples of the decision support tools. So DWR put in here in their 2-page document that we have linked to. So it's important you look over these and think about, is your tool going to fit under the decision support tool category or the implementation category? But if you do click decision support tool, you'll have additional questions that you'll have to fill out that really tease out what DWR has in the form. If the project is a decision support tool, describe how data will be collected, who will collect it, and any barriers that need to be overcome. So questions like that, and then there'll be a table below that asks you to really describe your qualitative benefits. Decision support tools, as you can probably tell, don't necessarily have quantitative benefits. They're more of a non-implementation project. So what are their qualitative benefits? So that's something that you'll have to describe. Another part of that same tab, I moved down lower here in this screenshot and then talking about the project partner resource contribution description. So in this part of it, you'll be asked to describe your partners, what they do, and also upload documents So say you have a letter of support or an approved MOU with them, there'll be a place to upload those files. So it's important that you have partners for your project. That's one added benefit for you in the scoring, is having partners for your project. So I'll pause there and see if we have any questions so far before we move on to the other parts of the forum. Just monitoring the chat box, see if we have anything. Right, don't see anything. I'll keep going. All right, so we covered the eligibility tab. Now we've moved on to the ENV or environment tab. And this tab is important because it relates to one of those items in that box that I showed related to DWR's new guidelines from their PSP document, their draft PSP document that came out in December. So they related to that CEQA and NEPA or environmental documentation. They have that 12-month readiness. So in that part of the form, you'll have to talk about, do you have a CEQA? Do you need to do CEQA? What type of CEQA do you need to do? Final EIR, MND, ND, additional explanation of justification of CEQA in our NEPA timeline. And then, below we explain that they've got this 12-month readiness requirement. So what does that mean? So I'm going to transition here back to the participatory budgeting process and explain how we're going to handle that draft PSP requirement. So to ensure we have, we're looking at and prioritizing 12-month ready projects, step one, like I explained, we'll allocate funding to those top projects like we did under Prop 1 round 1 based on their share of the top scores. And as I mentioned too, like we did under round 1, we ensured that a priority project from the state was prioritized. But now we clearly know we need to make sure we prioritize these 12-month ready projects. So if there is a project within the lower or beyond below the threshold of projects, for example, that has a really great schedule, and we discuss it through the participatory budgeting process, and we think it would fit well under the top suite of projects. It clearly has strong benefits. I think it would be much harder to put a 12-month project that only got the lowest score, one of the lowest scores. It would be hard to move that up. But we need to show DWR that we've implemented their prioritization of 12-month ready projects. So for example, if you had a project, below the line, you would prioritize that, move it up, but we would work through the participatory budgeting process and discuss that with the stakeholders when we do that. We imagine that a lot of the top scoring projects will have good CEQA readiness, but we'll know more when we get the suite of projects we get. All right, so questions so far. I know that's a new item, so I wanted to pause there and see if we have questions on the 12-month readiness. Got one here for clarification. Is CEQA completion required 12 months after project award, or is it after 12 months of your own system of prioritizing projects? So it'd be 12 months after that date I shared earlier. I think it's May 24th. What did I say it was? Let me exit out here. Yeah, it's in this table right here. So within an estimated 12 months of the funding award date. So our best guess is that date is May 2023. We'll update that date as the final PSP comes out, because we imagine DWR's schedule will be even more fine-tuned. But this is our best guess. So and it's important to note that this is this word estimated is here too. So if you're 13 months away from May 2023 or whatever the date is, we'll still look on your project as you're meeting that requirement. So there is some wiggle room here that estimated, and then we're prioritizing projects. It's not a requirement that you have that, but it definitely helps. So to answer your question, it's the funding award date. Any other questions? I know that's new information, so I want to pause there and see if we have any other questions. All right, don't see any for now. I'll move on. All right, so we talked about these tabs here, and they're orange because they're the pages or tabs that are required if you're filling out and requesting funding. All these tabs that are non-orange are the ones that you have to fill out if you just want to be included in the OWOW IRWM plan. So these are the more heavy-duty tabs you have to fill out with more detailed questions. So under the work plan tab, you'll have to give us your work plan, which is pretty self-explanatory. But what I thought I'd highlight is your project budget. And this is important because you enter in how much grant funding you're asking for. You also put in 2 other values, non-state cost share and then other cost share. And then it calculates your total costs. So it's important you keep in mind that if you're submitting for general implementation funding, and you don't benefit a DAC at all, you'd have to submit 50% cost share. That 50% cost share is the sum of the grant request plus non-state cost share plus other cost share. And as I alluded to earlier, this requirement can be waived or reduced if the project directly benefits one or more DACs or economically distressed areas. And we have the thresholds as I'll show related to how much cost share you need to provide. So also as part of the budget, you need to include your budget broken out under direct project administration, just more project management admin type costs, land purchase or easements, planning, design, engineering, environmental documentation, and then really your construction management, administration, and construction costs. Or if you're of a decision support tool, your decision support tool implementation costs. Just below the project budget, we get into the cost share waiver stuff. We thought it would be, since budget was on your mind when you're filling out the form at this point, that'd be important to have the links to, how you can request waiver of your cost share or at least a reduction of it. So you'll use those DWR DAC and DWR EDA mapping tools. You can also, as you'll see, be able to use, if you've done something verifiable like a income survey of your community, another way to calculate your cost share waiver, and there's guidance like on that. But as I mentioned, there are cost share waiver thresholds. So if you can waive all of your cost share, that 50% of total project costs, or you can waive 50% of that 50% of total project costs. But it depends on really how much of within your benefit area, how much DAC or / including is economically distressed area is within your benefit area. So you can see the thresholds here. If you're 25 to 49% of your population or geography is disadvantaged community / EDA, then you get that 25% cost share reduction. So you can see if 75 to 100%, that's where you get the total elimination or total waiver of your cost share. So it's not the same, even though we're talking about DAC, it's not the same thing as the DAC implementation funding pot. That's a different thing. You can still get your cost share waived under general implementation. You just have to prove using these tools or an income survey or other similar method that your project fits within one of these thresholds. Here's a slide. I thought, since we're talking about DAC and EDA, to highlight that other item in the DWR PSP that came out that we've modified our guidelines slightly. So it was related to ensuring that DAC projects can potentially receive general implementation funding. So as I mentioned, this would be handled during the participatory budgeting phase. So after projects are initially ranked. So if, say this is our suite of projects. We had 8 projects under the DAC competition pool that were submitted. and it's after they were ranked, but during the participatory budgeting process. So we'll know their scores. But we have 4 projects here at the bottom, project 5, 6, 7, and 8, that weren't scored as high. If they would like to switch to the general implementation category, they can choose to do that. Will it be advantageous to them to do that? They'll be able to look at because we'll have the general implementation pool scores at that time. They'll be able to see if they'll be, competitive in that process. Under this scenario, they're probably not going to be, they've already got lower scores, but you could choose to submit and be included in that category and get scored against the other projects. You wouldn't be able to take your score here and just move it over here. You'd have to use some ranking formula that the other entities use. So it's not the most, it's not a huge game changer for people, but we wanted to make sure we were respecting the DWR guidelines and reflecting that nuance there. So another tab under this section of the application is the schedule. So the schedule mirrors the budget. It's got those same four line items: direct project administration, land purchase, easement, planning, design, engineering, environmental documentation, construction, implementation. But the important thing I want to highlight is that DWR is given a deadline for when projects need to be completed. So it's important that your project reflects that deadline of December 31st, 2026. And this includes work done in the project administration category, that first category. All right, so we're almost there. I know this is a lot to take in, but I also wanted to highlight the next tab, benefits tab. I won't really go through everything here in detail, but it's important to note that the benefits tab is where you're going to upload your GIS or KMZ, that's a Google Earth type shape file of your benefit area. So that's where you're going to upload it. It's important you don't wait till the last minute to figure it out, because as you'll see, it's important to know your benefit area when you're claiming your benefits and your cost share waiver, but you'll upload it later in the application. We also have those benefit area guidelines here in this info box that I mentioned in that slide earlier on to help you determine your benefit area. We also have a link to the HUC 12, that's the Hydrologic Unit Code 12 level subwatersheds. We have this, you'll see a link to this page. Hopefully that helps applicants figure out if they have a surface water project or something like that. They have these HUC 12 boundaries. We know your project may be groundwater related, so we have a link to the major groundwater basins and the watershed as well. So there'll be some resources to help you out. And we even have a package of these shape files. If you have a GIS person, we have a file package that you can download and just make these maps on your own computer, on your own GIS software. So if you want your benefit area to be exactly whatever HUC 12 this is, you can do that using the shape files that are available for download. Another thing I wanted to cover real briefly on this benefits page that's important is the benefit classes and score increasers. This is where you're going to enter your numeric benefits and also the score increasers. So I won't walk you through that. It's like a long table that's hard to fit on a single PowerPoint slide, but it's a table that essentially looks like what I showed earlier. The different benefit categories, and the form will be slightly different depending if you're DAC implementation or general implementation, and then the score increasers will be slightly different depending on what you are. Another item here at the end that you're probably, if you're working on the application at this point, you're getting down to the wire, you're probably like, why do I have to fill out these things? I'm almost done with the benefits. Well, there's a couple water quality questions that we're required to do from DWR. So note that there's some questions at the end related to water quality, which are really important because DWR prioritizes these types of projects. So don't look past those seemingly random questions at the end. They are important for application purposes to DWR. All right, so that's the form. Hopefully that wasn't too painful looking at all those screenshots, but when you finish the form, after clicking the final tab, the submit project button, you'll receive an email notification that your project has been submitted with a link to a PDF report with your project details. You can make changes to your project at any time after submittal up until the call for project closes. Just click the submit project button after making the edits to update your project information report with the latest information. So that's the form. I also wanted to talk about DWR's documents. I mentioned the guidelines and proposal solicitation package. If you're a real inside baseball person, recommend that you take a look at these if you want to get inside IRWM and make your application as strong as you can. Because we have all the guidance and pop-up boxes in there. But it's also important to look at the documents from DWR as they're helping us dictate what's in the OWOW Call for Projects form. So those documents are on this webpage here. And this page is kind of overwhelming even for me, even though I go to it a lot. But the most important documents that you need to look at are under resource documents, and they keep them hidden for some reason. But you click on one of the, it's a plus, you plus resource documents, and you get all the documents. And that's where you'll find the guidelines, the proposal solicitation package, and then also a self-certification form that you'll eventually have to fill out if you're successful. Some other things, if you're wondering, like, why are we asking about the budget or what items include in the budget, they have specific attachments related to that. That's where the decision support tool implementation 1-page or 2-pager is that we got. So that's where all this information comes from. So it's important if you have time to really look at that. That'll really help your project application. They'll also be updating dates here. I mentioned that September date. We've got an inside baseball person on the comment box there saying they don't see that September date here. That is true. They remove the September date in here. But once they do propose new dates, they'll be under this next accordion drop-down menu when they are finally make it official. So I'll close with the schedule one last time. We covered the OWOW Call for Projects form. DWR still got to release their final grant guidelines. Then we go to staff review and participatory budgeting, which will take about a month. Then we go to governance, get the most successful projects approved, submit the application to DWR with those successful applicants. DWR then will announce their award. It's just an announcement that SAPA and its applicants were successful. And then eventually DWR would strike an agreement with SAPA. So I will pause there and see your questions. So I see a couple in the box. Can the form save in drafts so that you can work on it in multiple sessions before it's submitted? Yes, you can. You can definitely do that. Yeah, you'll be able to go in on the start page and edit existing and click on your project. Are there no attachments for attachment 5, 6, and 7? Attachments 5, 6, and 7. You mind clarifying which attachments you're referring to? Sorry, I don't know. Maybe that person left.
Hi, no, I'm here. I'm just trying to find it in the guidebook. So there's an attachment 5 for DAC, an attachment 6 for climate change, an attachment 7 for review process. And so it doesn't look like there's an actual attachment for those.
Oh, and I'll call for projects form.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we tried to capture all that in the call for projects application as we had it. If
you go to slide 51, you'll see it there. Yeah, so you see that they have 1, 2, 3, 4, and they're missing 5, 6, 7.
Oh, you're talking about DWR's missing it.
Yes.
Yeah, I can let them know. Yeah, I can let them know about that for sure.
And the other one was, it looks like there's an attachment 8, which I don't think is very detailed in the PSP, but it's something new, which basically says that everybody within your region has to sign a form that is approving the projects that are going into this particular application. And I don't think that's very detailed in the PSP, so I just wanted to call that out.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, we've reviewed that form very carefully, and we have comments to DWR about that. I'm sure other IRWM regions do as well.
Okay.
we think we'll be able to work something out with them regarding that. We've got comments into the, or we will send comments to them about that, and we want to clarify the voting mechanism. So,
Okay,
yeah, I wouldn't worry too much about that at this point in terms of filling out the call for projects application.
okay. Thank you.
Mhm. All right, let me see the other questions. I think there was another one. On DWR site, most of these docs say draft. Are there no final docs? No, there are no final docs at this point. The documents will be made final. Our best guess is in February. And we don't think much will change from the release to the final, at least as in the past. But if things do change in a major way and it impacts the call for projects, we'll delay the call for projects. We imagine if things change in a major way, DWR will push back its September deadline date. Thus, we'll be able to push back our call for projects date. So yeah, in the past, we've always started our call for projects when the draft gets released. We want to give people as much time to start their application. Any other questions? Happy to stay on as long as possible. I see we're at 12:03. All right. Well, if there's no other questions, we'll go ahead and close. Like I mentioned, this presentation will be posted on our website, and I will go ahead and paste the URL in the browser. So you have it, or not in the browser, in the chat box. And I'll also paste that URL of the DWR webpage. All right, well, if there's no other questions, I'll just let people copy that and we'll go ahead and close for the day. Thanks everyone for joining. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Ian.
Yeah, thank you.